This is Politics Friday on NPR News. I'm Brian Bakst at the Capitol. There's a tradition on this show that when the legislature adjourns in May, we turn to the person with work left to do. That's the governor. For any would-be governors listening to this broadcast, please put it on your schedule, preferably using ink. Governor Tim Walz has been around his share of sessions, but this was his last. He'll leave office after this term ends early next year. Some of the things he pushed for got done this year. Other items Walz wanted got shut down. The governor has come by our Capitol Bureau. Welcome back.
Good to be with you, Brian.
So you've issued one veto over your 8 years. Will the meter be stuck there?
I think most likely. Very collaborative. I'm very proud over 8 years that we've not had shutdowns. We've been able to do this, one veto. So we're not done yet going through. We've got clocks ticking. I think we have 11 days, and so we'll go through them.
Well, fun fact here, that's the least of any governor since Elmer Benson, who served in the 1930s. He didn't take any bills down.
He didn't.
No. So you have one more than the least.
In 90 years. I do think it speaks of the divided legislature and the ability to try and find some compromise.
Well, looked at another way, are you happy with everything on your desk, or is it merely tolerable in some cases?
Well, I don't think you're ever happy, but I'm happy with the process, and I think the ability to be able to give is what happens in a deliberative body. And I've always said I'm willing to compromise. I'm not willing to compromise on things like human rights, of movement towards authoritarianism, those types of things. No, but I'll compromise on the other things if it helps get things done.
So of the legislation passed this year, what do you think will have the most impact on Minnesota?
Well, I think we had to get compliance with H.R. 1. I think it's a terrible bill.
That federal law.
The federal law, the things that are really putting pressure on health care, some of those things. Certainly, I think the Hennepin County Medical Center, the HCMC, trying to put them on a path. Those two are kind of tied together because of the federal government's inability to deal with healthcare in general. And then I think some of the tools that we were given that weren't there. I've been asking for a few years to get these tools around fraud and program integrity. Things like payment withholding, really important.
And we'll get into some of those, but you sought a social media tax. It didn't happen. You wanted some response measures to immigration, agent activity here. That didn't happen. You asked for an up or down vote on guns. Yeah. That didn't happen. Which of those are you most dismayed by?
The guns. I just came right in the last couple minutes speaking with a parent and a young woman who was at Annunciation. It was a simple ask that I asked last year when we were talking at the end of summer about a special session. I'm not making a value judgment on how you view this issue. I believe strongly, and I think the data supports my position, that high-capacity magazines and these weapons of war add to deaths and injuries. And I just asked for that vote. And I think what's most disappointing in this is that wasn't taken. Look, people expect the process to go. If that thing would have been brought to the floor and it ended up 67 and failed, so be it. But that never happened because it never came to the floor.
You had spoken with the Annunciation families at various points during session, and how much did you convey the likelihood of this exact outcome?
Well, my wife, the First Lady, always talks about, one of the parents just remembered this, and they said it kind of steeled them for this. She said, we maybe grow old in this fight, but the fight will continue. I knew it would be a little bit difficult to get there. I thought, though, that the idea of just asking for the vote, that there would be a desire to take this off the table by casting the vote. So I didn't give them any false expectations, but I will tell you the reason that it got this close was not me, it was them.
What should they do now?
Well, that's what we can't lose the momentum. And what I said, we have to make it inevitable that come January, this vote happens. And what I mean by that is there's going to be work to be done. And I'm not.
You're talking about the election.
Yeah, I'm not in the fight with that. And I want to look beyond that election. Look, it's going to be an election issue. I think it's inevitable, not just because of this issue, because of $4.50 gas, war in Iran, all of the nonsense with the current administration. I think that there's a very real possibility that Democrats will be back in a situation where they have the House, the Senate, and the governor's office. With that being said, you're going to have to decide what you're going to do with that. And one of the things that I think is an expectation of these parents is we'd like to see this vote.
On ICE, you established something of a reconciliation commission to document the impact of ICE. There's 12 spots. So far, it looks like 150 applicants. How soon will this body be up and running, and what realistically do you think it can accomplish?
Well, I think what it'll do is it will create a historical record. And I think when people hear about this, and these are some of the world experts and they're folks that were involved in this, and it's very well thought out. This has been done before in countries where we've seen these types of activities happen. I think the biggest thing that it'll do is it'll make sure that the current administration that continues to rewrite history, whether it's taking out any references to slavery in American history, which, look, we're a great country, but we also did great damage at times. There's great countries can acknowledge that. And what I want is I want this captured. This is not just the egregious actions that happened by ICE. There's also stories of great heroism in here. There's stories of neighborliness and decency. Those need to be captured.
So timeline, when might they be doing the work, and when might you
I got
see the fruits
briefed
of
with
it?
a list of finalists, which are finalists for each of these positions on Monday of this week. And so my hope is that I'll be making a decision here in the next few weeks, and we'll start to get to work on this. And the groups that are already doing it are already gathering, doing a lot of work, capturing some of this information. So I'm very hopeful that here by summer they'll be in full work.
Is there anything about how you handled this or your interactions with the Trump administration that you might have done differently in retrospect?
Well, on every situation, look, I'd be candid on this. I've been drugged to Congress a couple times, and I am still, I would remind you, under federal investigation. It's the Trump administration's alleging against me that when I told people to exercise their constitutional rights peacefully and to record and help their neighbors, they considered that to be interference. So I am still under active investigation. So I'm a little cautious about talking about this.
Just the way
Not
you
so much.
tangled with the president, did that inflame things?
I can't tell you how he thinks. I worry about that. It's a good question. I worry, I trace this back to it started on Thanksgiving. When
Remind people what happened then.
the president randomly tweeted and used the R word towards me, and I responded by just asking him to release his recently taken MRI, and it appears that he took that very personally. I think it might have hit too close to home or something, and it pretty much escalated. I don't get into a lot of Twitter fights and things with him, but I also think of being combative. I wouldn't consider it combative. I'm just not going to roll over. When he was making accusations that Minnesota was actively not cooperating, and I think the local journalism proved, and Paul Snell's work at the Department of Corrections, that's absolutely false. I have said all along, we need immigration reform, but I follow what the law is. My job is not to enforce immigration. My job is to be the governor of Minnesota, and they want us to continuously do their job for them.
When you stepped away from re-election campaign, you said you would put your energy into fighting fraud, and you did sign some legislation this year to do that, including the Independent Inspector Office and those other steps, payment withholding.
Yeah.
Are those enough to stay ahead of the fraudsters?
I don't think you ever totally stay ahead of them. I do think some of the prepayment review, I can't stress enough this idea, because your listeners would be appalled by this. Until this legislation that just came to me this week, we had people who had committed fraud in a program, say, dealing with autism. They were under active investigation or indictment. They were also then engaged in maybe a housing program. I think everybody's like, geez, use some common sense. If they're taking money here, they're taking money. I agree 100% with you, but I couldn't legally stop them, and they would take us to court. So I think it's a great first start. But I think anytime you're seeing, and I have to say, pleased today, we see more indictments. BCA's been working on these cases for months. Is you're going to continue to see it in the news, but what I can tell you is the program integrity is probably as strong as any state.
Well, you mentioned what happened today. Just about an hour ago, the federal authorities from the DOJ were here, and along with RFK and Dr. Oz, and they were talking about fraud in Minnesota's managed Medicaid programs. And one of the officials, Assistant Attorney General Colin McDonald, said the fraud here in Minnesota is shocking, and he talked about other things being unprecedented. Talked about a strike force team coming in to root it out.
I've asked him to come. I said, don't send 3,000 ICE agents. Send me 3,000 forensic. Good. It's good they're here. But I just want to be very clear that this week, $1 billion fraud, not estimate, $1 billion in Florida. They sent everybody out here, 2 secretaries, all these people, which is great. I'm glad they're helping us, for $60 million. That's $60 million too many. But don't try and pretend that Minnesota is worse. Don't try and pretend this is elsewhere. This is a continuation of the retribution. But if their retribution is indicting and putting fraudsters in jail, I'll take that over sending Liam down to Texas with measles or shooting Alex Preddy. So at least they're focusing now on this, and they're going to claim full credit. What bothers me about that is not that they say, oh, Walz isn't doing anything about it. It bothers me because professional BCA agents, State Patrol, and other investigators are the ones that are doing a lot of this work. For example, today, I believe 12 of the 13 were already under payment withhold.
Okay. And Drew Evans, your superintendent of BCA, he was at that press conference today. The Star Tribune reported this week that there were people within your Department of Education who were discouraged from cracking down or inspecting meal sites that they suspected of fraud. That's in connection with the Feeding Our Future scheme. Were they?
Well, certainly not to my knowledge, but, people's experiences are what they're saying. I think context matters for all of this. We're in the middle of the global pandemic. We certainly wouldn't tolerate. I think this idea, though, of this, you've heard it with human services, I think you heard it in education. The role of these agencies is to get that help out. And we even heard a former commissioner at one time say, my job was more important to get the money out than program integrity. We disagree with that statement. We believe they're both equally important. So they certainly were not discouraged by us, but if they
within the governor's office, you're saying you weren't?
Oh, no, of course not. But if they felt like there would be no discouragement, and I said, I don't understand this, Brian, especially now where I don't have any political skin in the game. Why would I in any way not want to stop this fraud? It's the worst politics you could possibly have. It takes money from programs that I have fought my entire career to fund, and it takes money away from people who really need it. I can't imagine there's anybody angrier about this whole thing than me, and the idea that we wouldn't tell them. If it were up to me, we would increase the penalties. I have to tell you, 41 years sounds about right to me.
You're talking about Amy Bakst sentencing. You're happy with that?
I don't want to get in, and I always have to be careful I don't mess with these cases. Now that she's been adjudicated, tried, convicted, and sentenced, the damage that woman did to the state of Minnesota, to the integrity of these programs, and to real Minnesotans is incalculable. And so I'm grateful that in this case the judge decided that the punishment should fit the crime.
All right, shifting gears here, you named a new Chief Justice and another Associate Justice this week. 5 of the justices who will sit on that court will be your appointees by the time you're out. You've installed 148 judges, which is, I think, 50% or so of Minnesota's current judges over the time that you've been in office. How much do you think you've shaped the judiciary, and in what way?
I think the judiciary shaped me. And what I say by that is I've had the opportunity to work with 2 previous Chief Justices, Justice Gilday, appointed by Tim Pawlenty, and then, of course, Justice Hudson, first appointed to the bench by Governor Dayton and then by me. It shaped me in the protection of the integrity and the independence of that court was the most important things. You hear me talk a lot about the Judicial Selection Commission that has Republicans, Democrats, independents. They send finalists to me. The one thing I hear is even people who disagree with many of my policies, especially people who understand the judiciary, these are supremely qualified picks. And I hear them referred to. Governor Ventura used to get a lot of credit for this. I think they said it because they didn't expect him to be good on this, but he appointed really great judges. I think Governor Pawlenty appointed great judges. Governor Dayton appointed great judges. So I think where you don't hear a lot of grousing about this, because they're really conscious of it, because the idea, you've seen these courts that become incredibly partisan, and this Supreme Court has ruled in some big cases against us, and that's the way the system's supposed to work.
All right, next week is the DFL convention. At the beginning of the year, you would have been going down to Rochester to maybe scoop up the party endorsement. Are you still going to go?
I think I'm out of town that day, but I know we have the Humphrey Mondale dinner coming up, but I also think, too, is that it's time for me to step off the stage. There's going to be some endorsement battles down there. That's what we do. I think there's going to be a new governor candidate stepping onto that stage.
A new beyond Amy Klobuchar, or are you talking about
No,
Amy
I
Klobuchar?
think it's Senator Klobuchar, yeah.
Okay, I was
and maybe
wondering
somebody
if
else.
you were making news.
No,
Okay.
maybe somebody else. And I just think this is their show. I think if there's going to be a time to be reminiscent and all of that, there's different opportunities for that. But I think a state convention with, open potential for, a battle on that floor, probably best that I'm not in that mix.
So you're not planning to be there?
I don't believe so. And I do think we already had previously scheduled out of town, but I do have to be honest. I would say even if I were here, I think it's best not to be there.
So you've been traveling the country, appearing with candidates in other states. You were in Maine the other day, appearing with a U.S. Senate candidate. You have a U.S. Senate race here. How come you haven't endorsed in that race?
Again, I think very similar to not going to the convention. I think there's a sense of putting a finger on the scale. I think there is value. I had one, and I will tell you, having a battle with Aaron Murphy made me a better candidate. It also made me closer friends with Aaron Murphy, who I consider one of my dearest friends to this day, and we had a battle. Um, I think having someone come in, I'd be candid with you too. I don't know how much these endorsements matter.
But it's your own lieutenant governor. A lot of people are reading into the fact that you haven't endorsed your own lieutenant governor.
Well, it's also a dear friend in Angie Craig, who I encouraged to run for Congress and tried to support. So the situation here is I think we have two incredibly talented women. I think the electorate is fluid right now. I think Democrats are very, very frustrated that they don't think enough is being done. And I think it's important not to have the past, which is me, have a thumb on what the future is going to look like.
Would you be surprised if there wasn't a competitive primary in August? Maybe the candidate who doesn't get endorsed decides it's not worth the fight?
No, here's the thing, and this is tough, and I've spoken about it because I'm one of them. I never, ever said that I would abide by an endorsement, but I worked really hard to get it. Now, I didn't get it in 2018, and I will acknowledge Erin Murphy was good at that. She worked hard, and she got the endorsement, which I honored. I think it is very narrow, though, people who can spend the time there. We need it, because those are the people who knock the doors. They're the party faithful. But I think there's a whole lot of people that don't want to spend 6 weekends going to county conventions, Senate district conventions, state conventions, spending the money down in Rochester. I think primaries are really important. So I don't want to diminish the endorsing, but I would put my emphasis on a primary.
You've come out to say that Democratic-led states should maybe get in on the Redistricting Act, given that many Republican-led states are doing it following recent court rulings. Would it take a constitutional change here for that to happen?
I believe so. That's the way it is. And look, to your listeners, I want to be clear. I think Minnesota, maybe along with Iowa, we probably do this as good as anybody. Nonpartisan. We make the maps and they're thrown out, then it's nonpartisan judicial redistricting. Gerrymandering is a threat to the democracy. I'll get that out there.
But that's
clearly.
just because there hasn't been a trifecta in a redistricting
Yes,
year.
that's right. So it is, yes. So I think there's the potential to do that. I think you have to get societal buy-in to a little bit, but I want to be very clear. This entire discussion is because Donald Trump truly doesn't believe in democracy. He is putting his thumb on the scales, and he started with Texas, and in true Donald Trump fashion, didn't think about the next step was, well, if Texas is going to do it, then California's going to do it. And if California's going to do it, and then Virginia's going to do it. And so I simply said we shouldn't set back and allow them to take the democracy. And I equated it to this. It is a very bad thing to do mid-redistricting. It's very bad to do it with the intention of trying to gerrymander these districts. But it feels to me right now in the situation we're in, it's like putting a tourniquet on. We may lose the arm, but we will save the patient.
Have you discussed this issue much with Amy Klobuchar?
I have not. I have not discussed it with the senator at all.
How much have you talked to her since your exit and her entry into this race?
I've spoken to her some, not that often. She has her campaign. Once again, I would say this. This is a very talented, maybe the most talented politician we've seen in my lifetime. She doesn't probably need a lot of advice from me. And having run in the 24 presidential, I can be honest with you, Brian, I think there is a desire for people to have some distance from the curring, whether they like it or not. And I think the senator is probably pleased with some of the things we did and probably would take another path. And so I think it's unfair to not only the senator, I think it's unfair to the voters if I'm constantly there. I'm always available, and I will say it. We certainly want to give some lead-ins. I think it was important for the senator that we were very fiscally responsible this budget cycle. And she, have expressed that years past.
You're writing a book on the immigration enforcement ordeal. A lot of figures write books when they're gearing up for a bigger electoral stage, not receding from one. How should people assess it?
No, I'm not running again, but I do want to do some things. It's not just going to be focused on that. I think as I've gotten into this more, it's that I'm trying to understand the fix of how we got our politics like this. And I keep coming back to kind of this neighborliness thing that it feels to be lost. There's a book written about 30 years ago, Bowling Alone, to a society.
Adam Putnam. Yeah.
You know these people who do this. And I'm kind of interested in what to offer now. The New York Times sends somebody out every 6 months to some bar over in Waukesha, Wisconsin, and saying, what is the electorate think?
Not far from where I grew up, by the way.
You've seen those articles. And it doesn't really get at it. I think there's something there. And I lament, I'm very proud of what we did. I may want to make this the best state for kids, and we did that. I wanted to be fiscally responsible, and we did that. But I lament because I think I had the potential and do to a certain degree, and things changed, and I think no small part of that is we're living in a Trump world. that being one of the first outstate governors in a generation, someone who I still believe has very moderate policies on things, fiscally responsible, some of that got shadowed over. And so I want to tell the story of how did we get to that, because it feels like I got drug along with some of that into a position that doesn't really reflect who I am.
What kind of advance did you get for this book?
Nothing yet.
So you have to sell to make any money?
Yeah, I don't think you make money so much. I think it's to tell the story. I am actually, it's for your listeners out there who know this, I learned a little bit about the business. There's 5 big publishing houses or whatever, and so we got one of them. The one that showed great interest in this, and I just love the people who are there because I'm learning a lot about how you write, and is Norton. And the teachers out there listening would know the Norton Anthology. All of us who had it, they're mostly do some of those academics for schools, those types of things. So we'll see. I don't know. I'm encouraged.
So you got no money in advance?
No, I don't have anything.
So as we talked about, you leave office in just a little more than 6 months now. First off, do you know where you're going to live?
I do not. In fact, I'm working on that now, and I would just candidly say it's it's fun, it's exciting, but it's a little bit nerve-wracking. I am making the case, and I'm going to provide data to support this. I think I'm one of the few people who served in office. I served 20 years, it'll be exactly 20 years, and I never increased my personal wealth. And that is exactly right. That isn't because I didn't, I'm not understand how things. It's that you shouldn't be investing in stocks. You shouldn't be doing those things. You should be spending the time in this job. And I'm given a fair salary by the people of Minnesota, and so I have to figure out how I'm going to land and do that.
Yeah, you're not that old. Do you have another career in mind?
I keep saying I think I want to teach some more, and I've always wanted to teach at the college level. So I think I would like to do that. And again, not just you got these experience. Everybody who gets out of office, then it's kind of sage on the stage thing. I like the mechanics of education. I like the idea, and I think it keeps you in a place where you're more hopeful. I'm very hopeful about this generation. I've been watching these commencement speeches this spring, and watching some of the booing as their speakers have told them that AI is the be-all, do-all. I don't fall into that AI is the Terminator or AI is going to solve cancer. AI is a tool, but it needs to be used wisely.
You think you'll stay in Minnesota?
Yeah, I think I'll always be in Minnesota. My wife really loves St. Paul. I don't know if I'll end up back in Mankato. I think she's fallen in love with St. Paul, and we'll be here, but I am going to travel extensively. It's always been my thing. I promised my daughter we were scheduled September 1st, honest to goodness. September 1st, we were scheduled to go to Kathmandu, and we were going to go monastery to monastery to come up on the south side of Everest through hiking. That got derailed by the presidential, and so I owe her a hike. So we're either going to Kathmandu or we're going to do Kilimanjaro, I think.
Wow. Yeah. The thing you'll miss the least about being governor?
Negotiations around budgets.
And the most?
I think seeing the people of Minnesota, being able to go out. Yesterday I went to Hennepin County Medical Center just to say thank you to those folks. And I think all of this gets lost in like it's a numbers budget thing. To sit in a room with those professionals, from folks who clean the rooms to some of the most skilled physicians in the country in that room, and just to be able to go and thank them and understand what they had been going through. So that part of it.
Well, Governor Tim Walz, you won't have the legislature to deal with necessarily unless you call a special session. So I don't know what you're going to be up to in the next 6 or so months, but we'll keep an eye on it.
I appreciate it. I'm gonna get to the Northwest Angle. I have not yet, and so that was one of my last checkoff things. So I'm going to go up to Lake of the Woods and catch some fish and go to the Northwest Angle.
Well, thanks for coming in, Governor.
Yeah, no, glad. Seriously, if you want to go up there, that would actually be kind of fun. Our last hurrah for you and I.
There you go.
We've been at this a while.
Well, I remember you sitting here in this very seat when you were running for governor, and we would do all these interviews here too. So
yeah, no, I appreciate it. I appreciate your work.